Have you ever looked into the eyes of someone who had nothing left to lose? Someone whose very presence made others avert their gaze, not out of fear, but out of shame. What would you do if the only thing standing between you and a forgotten soul was your own willingness to see them? The markets of New Odessa were never truly silent. Even at the edge of dusk, the vendors' calls had softened. No longer the bold proclamations of mourning, but the tired repetitions of men and women who knew their goods might rot before they sold. The sky had turned a dusty bronze, with streaks of violet curling above the broken roofs and hanging tarps that flapped in the highland wind. The ground was a patchwork of old concrete and scorched earth. The air smelled of grease, brine, and hot wires. Jack walked with the slow, deliberate gait of someone who had nowhere to be, yet never lost his purpose. His boots scuffed the uneven stones. His eyes flicked from one vendor to the next, but he wasn't really shopping. Not for parts, not for food, not even for company. He walked the market because it was alive, and sometimes, when you've been alone long enough, that's enough. That was when he saw her. She was crouched between two crates stacked with rotting citrus, behind a stall selling salvaged tools. Her clothes were tattered, more holes than fabric, and her hair hung in tangled ropes, matted with ash. Her skin was a bluish gray, streaked with grime and bruises, but it was her eyes that stopped him. Large, luminous, and too still. They glowed faintly, not in an unnatural way, but like dying embers left in a hearth. No fear, no hope, just observation. She wasn't moving, just watching a piece of bread fall from the table to the dirt. The vendor, a balding man with cybernetic implants and oil on his fingers, kicked it aside. She didn't chase it, just watched, as if waiting for permission from the universe itself to reach out and live. Jack kept walking at first. 10 paces, 12. His hands were in his coat pockets, where he usually kept his mind. But something pulled at him. Not pity, not curiosity, just something deep and unspoken, like a memory almost. He turned around. When he approached her, she didn't flinch, but she tensed, her fingers curling against the concrete like claws. Not animal fear, learned fear, expectation of pain. Jack crouched to her level, didn't speak. He slowly removed a small food pack from his jacket, a sealed, self-heating ration. Pressed the ignition point. The packet puffed and warmed between his hands. A gentle hiss, a scent of rice and protein blend. Humble, but nourishing. He placed it on the ground just within her reach. "It's for you," he said quietly. She stared at him for a heartbeat, then another. Her eyes moved to the packet, then back to him, then again. She didn't ask what it cost, didn't say thank you. She moved as if in slow motion, like every gesture hurt. She reached for it, lifted it, held it close like a kitten. And then she ate, fast at first, frantic, then slower, as if tasting something for the first time. Jack stood silently, hands in pockets. He turned to go. Then a voice, barely a whisper, called out behind him. "Why?" Jack paused. "Why did you give me food?" He didn't turn around right away. The sun had dipped below the roof lines. Shadows were lengthening. "Because you looked like you needed it." "That's all?" Jack turned his head. "That's enough." Silence, then a name. "Elin." He turned fully now. "I'm Jack." Another pause. The girl, Elin, watched him with an unreadable expression. Then, softly, she asked, "Are you going to hurt me?" Jack's brows drew together. "Number never." Elin looked down, looked at her hands, then she looked up again. "I can't pay you." "You don't have to. People don't help without reason." "Maybe they should." Another gust of wind. A market vendor shouted something angry in the distance. Something about aliens and filth. Jack didn't look. He held out his hand. "I'm not offering forever. Just a place to sleep, and maybe a little more food. No questions, no debt." Elin didn't move at first. Then slowly, like a branch thawing in spring, she reached out. Her fingers were cold. She took his hand. They walked away together, past the dying stalls and flickering lights, past the eyes that turned and mouths that muttered, into the darkened streets of New Odessa. But for Elin, it was the first time she didn't feel alone in it. Have you ever stepped into a place so quiet it made your heart race louder just to fill the space? Can silence feel like kindness when you've never known safety? Elin didn't speak a word during the entire walk to Jack's home. The path curled through the outskirts of New Odessa, past the faded boundary posts and into the woodland shadows where brush and root overtook the forgotten trails. The wind tugged at her hair like fingers, but she didn't flinch. She was used to things pulling at her. Clothes, limbs, dignity. This was different. The wind didn't want anything from her. Jack said very little, only enough to keep the silence from sinking into discomfort. He mentioned that the woods used to be denser, that the old colony maps were inaccurate, and how the solar flares 2 winters ago had knocked out most comms in the area. Elin didn't respond. Not because she wasn't listening, but because she didn't know if words were allowed yet. When they reached his home, it wasn't what she expected. It wasn't metal or stone. It wasn't sleek. It was a cabin, wooden, worn, with patches of insulation in the walls like old scars. The kind of place people only saw in storybooks or memory. It smelled faintly of engine oil, cedar, and dust, but also of something older, something safe. Jack stepped aside and gestured. "Elin," he said softly, "this is it." She stood in the doorway without moving, her toes just beyond the threshold. It was warmer inside. She could feel it on her face, like sun through a window, but she stayed there, blinking. "You can come in," Jack said gently. She crossed the line like someone stepping into another world. Inside, the cabin was a single space with dividers made from old canvas tarps and netting. A fireplace flickered to one side, and near it, a cot lay half-made. A table stood in the center, cluttered with tools and wires, alongside a half-finished drone shell. The entire place was humming, not with electricity, but with the residue of a life lived alone. Jack pointed toward the cot. "That's yours if you want it. The floor's cold." Elin looked at the cot, at the floor, at Jack. And without a word, she dropped to the floor beside the fire, curled in on herself like an animal, unsure if it's safe to sleep. Jack didn't argue. He simply pulled a folded blanket from the shelf, walked over, and laid it gently across her shoulders. He didn't tuck it in, didn't touch her, just set it there like a silent promise. "I'll make something to eat," he said quietly. She didn't respond, but he caught the tiniest nod. Jack moved around the cabin like someone used to being watched. He kept his hands slow, his voice even. He told her about the stew he was making, root vegetables, dried meat, a bit of salt from the old ration depot. She didn't answer, but her eyes followed his every motion, not with suspicion, with hunger, for more than food. When he placed the bowl near her, she waited until he turned away. Then she ate, quietly, slowly, as if the bowl might disappear if she moved too fast. That night, Jack sat at his workbench tinkering with a cracked solar charger. Outside, the wind pushed against the wooden walls, but inside, the fire danced. He didn't ask her anything. She didn't say a word, but sometime around midnight he heard a sound. Software broken. He turned just slightly. Elin had fallen asleep sitting up, back to the fireplace, the blanket around her shoulders like armor. And she was crying. Not loudly, not with sobs. just slow tears running down her cheeks as she dreamed with her eyes closed. He didn't wake her. He simply stood, walked to a cabinet, and retrieved an old mattress roll. Laid it gently nearby, not too close, but close enough. When morning came, she was still on the floor, but the blanket had shifted, tucked under her chin now, her hands no longer clenched, and Jack, sipping bitter coffee at the table, didn't say anything. Because some things didn't need saying. Have you ever heard a sound that reminded you what safety feels like? Not the roar of protection or the hush of hiding, but the slow, steady rhythm of someone building something near you, not for you, not because of you, but simply while letting you be? The morning came slow in the forest. The sun, shy behind old clouds, filtered its way through the moss-covered trees like a memory trying to reach the surface. The wooden walls of Jack's cabin creaked softly as the air warmed. Outside, birds trilled unfamiliar melodies, as if testing their voices after a long silence. Elin opened her eyes to the scent of bitter coffee and burnt toast. She didn't move, not right away. She stared at the ceiling above her, watching the faint shadows of branches sway with the wind. Her back ached from the floor, but the blanket was warm, and the fire had not gone out. That, more than anything, puzzled her. Fires usually went cold when people stopped caring. She sat up slowly and looked around. Jack was sitting at his workbench, a soldering iron in one hand, a cracked circuit board in the other. He didn't look up when she moved, but he did speak. "There's water by the door. It's clean. Heat pack on the shelf if you're hungry." His voice was even, not cheerful, not dull, just steady. Elin stood, stretched, felt her joints complain from disuse, then walked to the shelf. She didn't thank him, but she took the heat pack, activated it, and sat cross-legged on the floor. The smell of warm grain filled the room. She ate slowly, and Jack worked. It was like that for hours. No questions, no instructions. Only the occasional hum of the iron, the smell of resin, the quiet clink of metal against wood. At one point she asked, "What are you fixing?" Jack looked up, raised an eyebrow slightly like he wasn't expecting her to speak. "Solar receiver, old model, burns out easy. I've been scavenging parts for a while." She nodded, thought about that, then asked, "Why?" "Because it's worth fixing." A pause. Ellen blinked. "Even if it breaks again?" Jack smiled faintly, especially then. She didn't understand that yet, but she held on to the words. Later, she wandered around the cabin while he worked. She didn't touch anything, only looked. The photos pinned to the wall, faded faces in sepia tone. A younger Jack, perhaps. A woman beside him, dark-haired and strong-eyed. A boy between them, smiling with both teeth and defiance. None of them were there now. She didn't ask. She had learned early in life which silences to leave alone. In the corner, covered by a tarp, was a machine she didn't recognize. She tilted her head, curious. "That used to fly," Jack said, not looking up. Ellen blinked. "Now?" "Now it sleeps." She stepped closer. "Can it wake up?" "Maybe, if someone wants it to." She looked at him. He was still working, still focused. But she saw something in his shoulders. A kind of sadness folded into determination. Like a man who kept building things not because he believed they'd last, but because the act itself made him whole. She returned to her spot by the fire, and then softly she said, "Thank you." Jack didn't reply, not with words, but he set his tool down, stood, and poured an extra cup of coffee, brought it to her without ceremony. "Careful," he said. "It bites." She took the cup, warmed her fingers. It was awful. She drank it anyway. That night, when the fire was low and Jack had gone to his corner cot, Elin lay awake, staring at the shadows again. The world outside was still dangerous. But inside this cabin, with the sound of slow breathing and the ghost of burnt toast in the air, she began to believe something she hadn't dared before. She might be allowed to stay, just for a little while, just until she could breathe again. Have you ever felt it? That subtle shift in the air when something in your life turns, so quietly you don't notice it until you've already crossed into a different kind of day? The wind changed on the fourth morning. Jack had gone out before dawn, leaving behind the faint scent of fresh wood smoke and damp boots. Ellen woke to the sound of birds again, but they were closer this time, perched right on the window slats, peering in like curious spectators. She lay still for a long while, listening. The cabin walls expanded and contracted with the cool air. The fire was out, but the warmth remained, trapped in the wooden bones of the place. She sat up slowly, letting the blanket fall from her shoulders. The floor was cold, but not unfriendly. She moved toward the window and peeked out. Jack's silhouette was in the clearing beyond the trees, a small axe in his hand, not raised in violence but rhythm. Chop, breathe, chop, pause. She watched him for a long time before realizing she wasn't afraid anymore. It was an odd thing to notice the absence of fear. Like when a toothache vanishes overnight and you keep poking at the place, wondering if it'll come back. That morning, she didn't flinch at every creak. She didn't flinch at all. Instead, she put on the oversized coat Jack had left near the door and stepped outside. The wind met her with a chill, but also a kind of greeting. The forest was alive with smells and sounds and things that didn't want to hurt her. She walked barefoot across the cold grass, damp and soft under her steps. Jack didn't stop chopping. He acknowledged her with a glance, then nodded toward the kindling pile. "Think you can stack?" She nodded. They worked side by side for an hour. He chopped, she stacked. The pile grew. When it was done, he wiped his brow with his sleeve and said, "You're strong." She shrugged. "I had to be." "Still, it counts." She looked down at her hands. They were dirty, raw in places, but they didn't shake anymore. Later that day, they sat on the porch, 2 metal cups of water between them. Elin asked about the woods, what animals lived there, which plants could sting, which ones healed. Jack told her stories, not as a teacher, but as someone passing down fire. His words weren't polished, just true. Then came the story that changed everything. "There's a place," Jack said, eyes distant, "beyond the northern ridge. Used to be a research site, military-funded, then private, then forgotten. Lot of tech left behind, some of it buried, some of it broken, some of it locked." Elin's head tilted. "Locked?" Jack nodded. "Vaulted. No power, no access codes, but someone wanted it hidden." "What's inside?" Jack exhaled. "No one knows, but I've always wondered, not for greed, for understanding." Elin leaned forward. "Have you tried to open it?" "I've mapped the route. It's not far, but getting inside, that's another thing." They sat in silence. Then Elin said, "I want to go." Jack looked at her, not surprised, just thoughtful. "Why?" She shrugged. "Because you cared, and I want to help you find something worth caring about." He smiled, a small quiet thing. That night they packed. Jack brought gear, water, maps. Elin brought nothing but herself. The wind outside had shifted again, like the forest was exhaling something long held in. And in the soft glow of the fire, she whispered, "You're not alone either, Jack." He didn't answer, but he didn't need to. Have you ever walked into a place where the silence feels thicker than stone? Where the air holds its breath, and the trees lean in as if listening? Jack had always traveled light. His gear was old but reliable. Leather straps creaking, worn canvas stitched more times than he could count. The pack on his back held just enough to keep 2 people alive for 3 days, no more. He never carried more than he needed. And now, for the first time in years, he was carrying not just supplies but someone else's hope. They moved through the trees like ghosts. Aylin was quieter than he expected, careful in her steps, aware of every broken twig beneath her feet. She didn't ask questions. She didn't need to. There was a destination, and that was enough. The path north was half memory, half instinct. Overgrown trails, collapsed signage, patches of earth that shifted underfoot. The world had changed while no one was looking. Once patrolled borders were now reclaimed by moss and silence. By noon, they reached the first ridge. From there, the world opened. A valley stretched out before them, flanked by skeletal towers of metal. Watchtowers, rusted and hollow, their lights long dead. Ellen stared. Jack knelt beside her and pointed. "Past the second ridge," he said. "Behind the tree line. That's where it sleeps." "What sleeps?" He didn't answer. They kept walking. As the sun arced lower, the shadows grew longer. The wind carried the scent of minerals and something faintly electric. Jack felt it in his teeth, a buzzing on the edge of awareness. Elin felt it too. Her fingers twitched, her steps slowed. That night, they camped near an old concrete shell, a structure without a roof, vines strangling its corners. Jack started a small fire using a solar spark and twigs soaked in resin. Elin sat close to the heat, arms wrapped around her knees. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded. Then, after a pause, "Were you ever afraid?" "Still am." "Of what?" "Not finding anything," he said. "Or worse, finding something that changes everything." She was quiet for a while, then whispered, "I think we already did." He didn't ask what she meant. He already knew. The next day, they crossed into the dead zone. No birds, no bugs, no wind, just stillness. The trees thinned, and the ground shifted from soil to concrete slabs cracked with age. Structures half buried jutted from the earth like broken teeth. They moved carefully, Jack scanning with a handheld reader that blinked but gave no sound. Then they found it. The vault? It was not majestic, not what legends had painted, just a sloped panel of steel and carbon fiber composite built into the hillside, nearly invisible under growth. But the air changed around it, heavier, like memory. Jack stepped forward, knelt, and brushed away the moss. A faded emblem revealed itself. Not military, not corporate, something older. He placed his palm near the surface. Nothing. "No keypad," Elin said. "No reader either." He nodded. "Voice-coded maybe, or retinal, but if power's dead..." She stepped closer. "Can we open it?" "I don't know," he said. "Maybe." They sat for hours. Jack pulled out a schematic. Hand-drawn lines. Data scrapped from old drives, theories. Elin watched him work, her eyes darting across the vault door as if it might open on its own. At one point, she whispered, "What if it's not meant to open?" Jack looked up. "Then it's still worth trying." Elin didn't speak again, but she moved closer. Together, they examined the panel seams, the rusted hinges, the shallow depressions that might once have been touchpads. And then, as the light faded, she placed her hand flat against the surface. The metal was cold, but something under it pulsed. Alive. She pulled back, breath catching. Jack saw her face, and for the first time, he didn't doubt. Not her, not this. The vault would open, not today, but soon. Have you ever touched something that seemed to remember you? Something that had no eyes, no mind, no soul, but still responded like it had waited for your hand all along. The day began not with the sun, but with breath. Cold, shallow breath coming from both of them. Elin woke to find her hand still hovering over the vault's surface. She had not meant to fall asleep there, but neither had Jack moved her. He had simply kept watch, his back against a twisted tree root, his eyes open through the hours of dark. Morning wasn't much different from night in the dead zone. The fog clung close to the ground. Light struggled to penetrate the thick cloud that hung above the vault. Still, they moved slowly, deliberately. Jack unpacked a small scanner, patched together from old salvage, and set it against the vault's side. He wasn't expecting it to work. It didn't. "Power source is embedded," he muttered. "Too deep to reach with what we've got." Elin remained quiet. She crouched, fingertips brushing the seams of the door like a pianist searching for familiar keys. Her breath came slow, measured. The metal was no longer cold. It wasn't warm either, just present, as if it had started to pay attention. She looked up. "Do you think they meant for someone like me to open it?" Jack didn't answer immediately. He was sawing something by the fire pit, the soft hiss of flux smoke curling upward into the still air. "I don't think they meant for anyone," he said. "I think they just hoped." Elin sat down beside the vault. She pressed her back against it, eyes closed. For the first time since arriving, she didn't feel small in its shadow. She felt aligned. Jack joined her after a while. "You're not like them, are you?" he said, eyes scanning her profile. "Not just your skin or your eyes, something deeper." She opened her mouth, then closed it. Finally, she whispered, "No, I'm not." He didn't press. Instead, he asked, "Why run?" She looked away. "Because I said no." The wind stirred, and Jack didn't need to know more. Later that day, they began testing the vault's physical limits, measuring pressure seams, tracing conduits. Jack rigged a power coil to mimic an emergency boot sequence, while Elin stood back, her hand always hovering just out of contact. When the coil fired, the door lit faintly, lines etched in its surface glowing a soft amber. They stepped back in unison. It faded quickly, but it had been real. "Something in there still breathes," Jack said. "Then let's wake it." That night, she told him everything. About the world she left. About the ones who had built her, not born her. About the child they wanted her to bear. About the price of her refusal. Jack listened, every word, no judgment, no shock. When she finished, he simply said, "Good." She blinked. "Good? You chose." She looked at the vault again. "And now?" "Now we see if choice matters." They stood together before the door, side by side. Elin raised her hand once more. But this time, it moved first. The vault door did not open, not yet, but it pulsed, once, twice, then dimmed. As if nodding, as if saying, "I know you." And Elin whispered back, "Then remember me." The wind picked up. Far above them, unseen satellites blinked into life, triggered by something old waking up. And deep beneath their feet something turned, not a machine, not a weapon, but a memory. Do you believe the earth forgets? That the ground we walk on is nothing more than dirt and rock? Or do you think, maybe, it remembers? Every footstep, every lie, every truth whispered into the soil. The vault didn't open the next morning, or the one after that. But something had changed. The pulses came more frequently now, soft, rhythmic, like a heartbeat trying to sync with another. Elin had started to hum when she sat near it, not because she meant to, but because it felt right. The notes weren't hers, not truly. They came from somewhere deeper, older. Jack noticed. "You always hum the same pattern," he said, adjusting a sensor rig nearby. "You even pause at the same intervals." "I don't know why," Elin said. "I just do." He didn't press her further. Instead, he recorded it. 3 nights later, during a storm that came in without wind or rain, just pressure, he played it back through a cracked audio transmitter linked to the panel. And for the first time, the vault answered. A section of the wall shifted, not opened, just moved, enough for light to escape. It wasn't electric, it wasn't natural, it was internal, like the glow of thought. They didn't try to force it, they waited. Aylin sat against the shifting wall and began to speak. Not commands, memories. She spoke of the day she ran, barefoot through glass, blood on her skin, her heartbeat louder than alarms. She told the vault about the woman who hid her beneath floorboards, the child who offered her a cracked cup of water without asking why she bled blue. She told it about Jack, how he never asked what she was, only who she was now. The vault listened, and slowly it responded. A section at the base released, hissing softly as stale air was drawn in. Inside was not a chamber, not yet, just a passage, narrow, curved, lined with metal that breathed like living bark. Jack held the lantern. Aylin stepped first. The tunnel curved downward, the air growing cooler, denser. Symbols lined the walls, spirals, interlocking circles, patterns that looked like constellations but shifted when stared at too long. They passed under arches that weren't built but grown. Metal and bone fused into shapes neither man nor machine had designed. After what felt like an hour, they reached a platform. Above it hung a sphere, floating, pulsing with the same rhythm Aylin had hummed. Jack stepped forward. "What is it?" Aylin didn't answer with words. She reached out. The sphere responded, unfolding like a flower in reverse. Petals of memory, strands of light connecting in midair. A voice filled the space. Not one they knew, not one they feared, just presence. "You are the echo," it said. "The chosen, dissonance." Jack froze. Aylin's eyes burned. "I'm not an echo," she said. "I'm not what they made me." The voice pulsed again. "You are not what they made. You are what you chose. That is why you are here." Jack looked to her. "Is it talking to you?" Aylin nodded. "Number. It's talking to us." The sphere shifted, revealing a map. Not of stars, of memory, events, failures, wars, but also kindnesses, choices, acts of quiet defiance. At the center was a small pulse. Aylin, Jack, this place. The sphere dimmed. "Do you want to know?" it asked. Aylin turned to Jack. He nodded once. Together, they stepped into the light. The first thing they saw was not war, or glory, or gods. It was a child. A projection, perhaps. A memory, or maybe a beginning. She stood barefoot in a field of glowing grass, arms outstretched toward a sky filled with twin suns and strange, circling birds. Her skin shimmered, not like Aylin's, not like any human's, but something in her eyes was familiar. Wonder, yearning, trust. Aylin and Jack stood in silence as the memory unfolded. Around the child, others began to appear. Adults, elders, creatures that once might have been called monsters, but here they knelt beside her, taught her, laughed with her. This was not a military archive. This was a sanctuary. The sphere hovered behind them, the room bathed in soft amber light. "These were the first," the voice said. "They chose to leave nothing behind but stories, not weapons, not warnings, only memory." Jack crossed his arms. "And now?" "They chose again," the voice replied. "You?" Aylin looked down at her hands. "What am I supposed to be?" The room answered not with words, but images. A field scorched by war, then blooming. A hand reaching into rubble, lifting a child. A man staying behind so others could leave. A woman refusing to harm, even when it meant pain. "You are choice," the voice said. She turned to Jack. He looked tired, but not broken. He smiled. "You always knew, didn't you?" she whispered. He nodded. "I hoped." They moved deeper into the chamber. Panels lit as they passed. Seeds preserved in crystal. Languages suspended in sound waves. Oceans trapped in droplets of light. At the very center was a cradle. Not for a baby, for a mind. The sphere floated above it. "If you stay, it will awaken fully," the voice said. "If you leave, it will sleep again." Jack exhaled. "And what happens if it wakes?" "Then what was forgotten remembers." Elin stepped forward. "Will it be angry?" "No," the voice said, "only waiting." They didn't speak again, not for a long time. Jack sat on the edge of the platform. Elin stood beside him, hands folded. Then she reached into the light. The moment she touched it, the room shifted. Not violently, like a breath taken in after a long cry. The sphere rose, the cradle glowed, and across the valley above the clouds scattered. Satellites blinked awake. Oceans beneath ice stirred. Forests, long buried under concrete, bloomed from dormant spores. In distant corners of the galaxy, ships detected signals not heard in generations. And on Earth, in a quiet cabin long abandoned, an old emergency beacon flickered to life. Jack opened his eyes. The vault door behind them had closed, not locked, just sealed for now. He looked to Elin. She was still there, still glowing, but not alone, not alien, just becoming. They would live there for a while, grow what could be grown, teach what could be taught, until someone else found the map. Or until the stars forgot again. But for now, the world was quiet, the vault remembered, and the light remained. If you were standing in Jack's place, would you have chosen the same? We'd love to hear your thoughts below. This story was built from a whisper, but every comment, every voice keeps the signal alive.